Guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom, sharp as a blade. Elena's heart stopped. She had no lawyer, no defense, just the crushing weight of accusations she couldn't escape. The billionaire's glare burned into her, as if her silence alone was proof. The gavel struck. Whispers rose. Her world was collapsing, but then the doors burst open. Two figures strode inside, the billionaire's twin sons, holding a secret that could shatter everything. This is the story of a maid condemned without a voice until the truth came crashing in. Welcome, story lovers. Where are you watching from? Hit the like button and drop your city name in the comments so we can see how far our story travels. The morning sun slipped through the tall windows of the billionaire's estate, spilling light across marble floors polished to perfection. For most, the house was a fortress of wealth and privilege, but for Elena, it was simply where she worked. She was the maid, quiet, efficient, and invisible in a world that never saw people like her beyond the uniform she wore. Her days began before dawn. She scrubbed, dusted, and ironed while the city still slept. Elena wasn't bitter. She had left her small village years ago, carrying nothing but courage and hope, determined to provide for her young daughter. Every paycheck meant school fees, food on the table, and the fragile dream of a better future. Inside those towering walls, Elena kept her head down, but her presence was always felt. She knew which door squeaked, which chandelier flickered, and which painting needed dusting twice a week. Her work was invisible yet essential. Still, she was treated as though she didn't belong, spoken to in clipped tones, often dismissed with cold stares that reminded her she was an outsider in the place she kept spotless. The billionaire. Mr. Harrington rarely acknowledged her, except when he wanted to remind her of her place. Elena told herself it didn't matter. What mattered was her daughter's smile at the end of the day, proof that every sacrifice was worth it. But beneath the polished surface of her daily routine, shadows were gathering. A missing item here, a suspicious glance there, whispers that carried her name in the servants' quarters. Elena felt the shift but chose to ignore it. After all, she had done nothing wrong. She had no idea that soon her loyalty would be questioned, her dignity stripped away, and her very freedom put on trial. The world she thought she knew was about to turn against her, setting the stage for a fight she never imagined she would have to face. It began with whispers, quiet at first, almost too soft to notice. A misplaced watch, a missing necklace. In houses like these, where wealth overflowed and extravagance was every day, small losses were inevitable. But soon the murmurs began pointing in one direction, toward Elena. At first she brushed it off. She had nothing to hide. She worked with her head down, hands steady, determined to ignore the sideways glances. But one afternoon, as she was folding linen in the grand hall, Mrs. Harrington passed by with narrowed eyes. "Careful with those," she said sharply, her voice laced with suspicion. Elena's heart sank. It wasn't about the linens, it was about her. The next day, the accusations became louder. A pair of diamond earrings vanished from a dressing table, and suddenly Elena's name was whispered among the staff with growing certainty. Her stomach twisted with fear. She wanted to defend herself, but in this house, voices like hers carried no weight. To them, she was just the maid. Then came the moment that changed everything. Mr. Harrington himself stormed into the servants' quarters, holding the empty velvet box in his hand. His face was red with fury. "You think you can steal from me and get away with it?" His voice thundered, echoing against the stone walls. Elena's knees went weak. She shook her head, words caught in her throat. But before she could explain, he demanded that the police be called. The humiliation was unbearable. The officers searched her small room, rifling through her belongings, every folded shirt, every worn-out shoe. Her most precious possession, a faded photograph of her daughter, lay exposed on the bed. Nothing was found, but the damage had already been done. She was dragged out of the estate in front of the other staff, her wrists cuffed as if she were a criminal. The trial came swiftly. Elena had no lawyer, no one to stand for her. To the Harringtons, her guilt was already proven by her silence. The courtroom was cold, filled with murmurs of disdain as she stood trembling in the defendant's box. She tried to speak, tried to explain her innocence, but her voice cracked under the weight of judgmental stares. Every word seemed swallowed by disbelief. The prosecution portrayed her as a desperate woman from a poor background who seized an opportunity in the wealth around her. Elena wanted to scream, to shout that she worked harder than anyone in that mansion, that every coin she earned went toward her daughter's future. But her words were drowned out by the sneering certainty of power. Day after day, the evidence mounted against her, not objective evidence, but assumptions and prejudice. The missing jewelry was never found, yet her name remained stained. The judge, stern and unmoved, looked at her with the same suspicion she had seen in the Harringtons' eyes. Elena's world collapsed with each passing moment. She thought of her daughter waiting at home, unaware that her mother might never return. She thought of her dreams, her sacrifices, her endless hours of labor, all erased by a single accusation. She felt herself shrinking under the weight of injustice, a lone figure fighting against a tide too powerful to resist. But just when despair threatened to consume her, the doors of the courtroom swung open. Heads turned as two figures stepped inside, Mr. Harrington's twin sons. Their faces were pale, their eyes filled with a sense of urgency. They moved quickly to the front, whispering to the defense table, their presence commanding silence. Elena's heart pounded. Why were they here? What did they know? The room buzzed with confusion. For the first time, doubt flickered across the faces that had condemned her. Something was about to change, but what? The silence inside the courtroom was suffocating. Every eye followed the twin sons as they stood before the judge, their posture rigid, their voices trembling with urgency. One of them placed a small black pouch on the table. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Inside were the missing earrings, the very items that had condemned Elena. The revelation struck like lightning. The sons confessed they had discovered the jewelry in a locked drawer of their father's office, hidden away for reasons they couldn't fully explain. Mr. Harrington's face darkened. His jaw clenched, but the weight of evidence was undeniable. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Could it be? After weeks of humiliation and endless accusations, the truth was finally emerging. The prosecutor's voice faltered, scrambling to adjust the narrative. But the damage to their case was irreparable. The courtroom, once thick with suspicion, now crackled with unease. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing, as if suddenly questioning everything he had been told. Elena's knees trembled. She had stood alone, branded guilty without proof, her life dangling by a thread. And now this. The very heirs of the man who had accused her had shattered the foundation of the trial. Whispers filled the air. Some stared at Elena with guilt, others with shame for ever doubting her. Tears burned her eyes, but she held her head high. This was no longer just about jewelry. It was about dignity, about truth, about a woman fighting to reclaim her humanity in a world determined to strip it away. The gavel slammed. The trial had turned. Elena's fate was no longer sealed in silence. It was unfolding in front of everyone, with justice hanging by a fragile thread. When the final verdict was read, Elena's body nearly gave way. The judge declared her not guilty, his voice steady but carrying the weight of an entire courtroom that had wronged her. The jewelry's discovery had unraveled the case, exposing not just false assumptions, but the deep prejudice woven into every accusation she faced. Elena walked out of that courthouse with trembling steps, but her spirit was unbroken. Outside, the sky stretched wide, and for the first time in weeks, she felt air fill her lungs without the crushing weight of fear. She had survived humiliation, injustice, and silence. Yet what stayed with her was not just relief. It was the memory of every stare, every whisper, every moment she was treated as less than human because of who she was. The Harrington twins never explained why they had acted so late, but their intervention had saved her. Still, Elena knew the truth. It should not have taken two wealthy voices to prove her innocence. Her own words should have been enough. She returned to her daughter that evening, holding her close, promising herself that this trial would not define their future. but the scars ran deep. Her story was not just her own. It was the story of countless others who had been accused, silenced, or discarded simply because of where they came from or the color of their skin. Elena's freedom was restored, but her faith in justice was shaken. The question echoed within her, heavy and unresolved. How many more lives would be crushed before the world finally saw the truth? Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more powerful stories and new videos.